Please ensure your cell phones are turned off and welcome to everyone that's attending this evening from home and welcome to those that are in the gallery with us. Our staff, of course, are here to help us provide information to us so we make the best decisions and are the experts that we're going to see here in a few minutes. Ms. Masuda calls and item number 2, please.
That South Huron Council approves the agenda as presented.
And the mover, Deputy Mayor moves, second by Councilor McLeod-Haggett. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carries with 7. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any disclosures at this time? And not seeing any, move on to presentations. And we welcome Tina and Sean Michael. I believe they're here.
Good afternoon. I was just figuring out the new Zoom.
Welcome. Please proceed whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I get started, just confirming you're able to see my screen okay?
Yeah, yes, we can see it very clearly. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be in front of you again today to speak about the ongoing development charges study. The last time that we were here was back in February, I believe the 11th, where we came to present the outcome of the December 31st, 2025 DC background study that was released. And then since that time, there's been a few important updates that have come up that affect the numbers that were presented back in February. So specifically, the first one relates to the grant that the municipality secured. And then the second set of changes relates to some changes that were identified relating to the DC Reserve Fund for wastewater, as well as some changes to the capital program, and we'll discuss those in future detail in the slides to come. So our goal today is just to provide council with an update on what has changed since that public meeting, and then receive some direction on next steps before we finalize the second addendum that will be coming forward, and then ultimately bringing forward a bylaw, a draft bylaw for council's consideration. So as mentioned, the first set of changes relates to the grant that the municipality secured, which was a total of about 4.2 million, and it covered projects for the Exeter wastewater or lagoons. And with that, 2 of the projects that were included in that grant funding application were in the DC program. And so the amendment to the background study was to incorporate that reduction in costs that will come from the DC recoverable costs from that grant. So if we're looking at the chart, the 2 projects were the William Street SPS force main twinning, as well as the UV at the Exeter wastewater treatment plant. So total cost is about a little under 2 million, and now the grant will cover 1.4 million of that. And then after all the deductions that are made, that now brings only 420 or reduces to 420,000, the amount that will be recovered from the development charges. This change was communicated through the addendum report that was issued on March 10th. And what that communicated was that there's now this reduction to the calculated charge, reducing, for example, in a single family detached house, it would reduce the DCs by $208. And then for non-residential development on a per square foot basis, it'll be a reduction of 9 cents per square foot. So as I mentioned, there's been other changes identified since that addendum was issued back in March. And the first one we'll talk about relates to the DC Reserve Fund for wastewater. And this is for completed projects. So basically, when the municipality undertook the Grand Bend Phase 1 project, there weren't sufficient funds in the DC Reserve Fund in order to fully fund that DC recoverable portion. So essentially, the municipality interim financed the cost from other sources. However, when the December 31st report was released, that interim finance was not reflected. And so as part of this amendment, we're now adjusting the DC reserve fund balance to reflect that interim loan that's still outstanding. So what it does is it reduces the balance in the DC reserve fund, which had been a positive of $239,000. And once you account for that interim loan, it shows that the reserve fund's actually in a deficit position of approximately 1.2 million. And then the second set of changes relates to the Huron Park sewage pumping station projects. So in the December background study, there had been two projects anticipated, the first being the emergency storage project and the second component being the Huron Park SPS upgrades. The emergency storage component has been removed as it was deemed not feasible, primarily due to the size of the land that would be required in order to accommodate the size of the storage tank. And then basically as a result of that change, that now accelerated or advanced the timing of the Huron Park sewage pumping station projects from, initially 2029 to 2034 window and brought it forward to 26-27 timeframe. As well, the project costs and cost estimates have been refined. And there's also financing costs that have been incorporated as shown in the table to show that there would be debt financing for that project. So overall, for the Huron Park sewage pumping station projects, the revised gross cost capital estimate is now 4.3 million, of which 2 million will be eligible to be funded from DCs. So when we pull all these changes that we've talked about together and look at the overall impact on the wastewater capital program, what we see is that in total, the gross capital cost estimate has increased by 1.6 or 1.7 million. But at the same time, there's now slightly higher benefit to existing development deduction, which is required by the Act, as well as that recognition of 1.5 million in grant funding. And then that results in the net DC recoverable cost decreasing by approximately 1.5 million. And then just to tie all of this together, so over the next couple slides, we'll talk about, show the calculated charges. So in this one, we're showing the charge per single family detached housing. And if we look to the far column, which shows the indexed rates, it compares the existing rates of the charges the DCs currently enforced today, compares those to what the DC that was calculated in the December report, and then compares it to the revised charges now. So if we just look at the bottom row, what we see is that the existing charge is 6,467, so 6,500. In December, it was anticipated or proposed that the charge would increase, or the total DC would increase to 19,400. And then with these revisions, the DC is now proposed to be 19,100, which is a reduction of about $293 from what was in the December 2025 report. Overall impact from existing rates to these revised rates is $12,644. Then similarly, if we look at the rates per square foot of non-residential gross floor area, currently the municipality charges $1.55 per square foot. The December report had proposed the charge going to $6.87, and then the revised is $6.74, which is a 13-cent reduction from the December report. Overall increase over the current charge is $5.19 per square foot. Then just to provide some context to these charges, we've updated the comparison to the DCs in other municipalities. So we'll show this starting with the single detached dwelling unit. And what this shows, if we're looking at, is that the municipality's relative position under both the originally proposed and this revised is basically unchanged, so it stays the same relative to the comparators. And this pattern, you would see it for commercial and retail, where the position just shifts slightly to the right, but not by much. And then even when we look at industrial, the pattern is the same. Another thing that we wanted to talk about is that council has some options regarding how to implement these calculated development charges. So two options that have been presented for your council's consideration are the first one being to implement the full calculated development charge rates plus indexing effective January 1, 2027, which would give like what some of the feedback received from the development community is that they wanted some time to adjust to these increases. So the deferred implementation will provide that to them. And then the second option would phase in that increase over 2 years. So again, starting in January 2027, but instead of implementing the full calculated rate, the half of the calculated increase would be implemented in 2027, and then the remainder would be implemented in 2028 plus indexing. And then the trade-off to note with the second option is that any DC revenue that's foregone as a result of the phase-in must be funded from non-DC sources according to the legislation. So for example, you may have to use property taxes in order to fund the cost of that exemption. And then initial estimates of the revenue foregone are that it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 545,000. There were also some legislative changes that came through the province. So there was Bill 98, which added an exemption for nonprofit, a statutory mandatory exemption for nonprofit retirement homes. And then the announcement for the Canada-Ontario Partnership to Build, which is partnership between the federal and the provincial governments and partnering with municipalities. So they would provide 8.8 billion over 10 years for infrastructure investments. At present, would note that the specific details of the program, because they note that there'll be requirements for municipalities to commit to some reductions of between 30% and 50% for 3 years. However, those details as to who will be required to make those commitments and how the program will work, that has not been communicated. We are monitoring, and as soon as we find out, we will make sure to communicate as well. So this brings us to almost the final slide where we talk about next steps. So as we mentioned today, we're really looking to receive council feedback as well as any public comments that may be there regarding that we can then take and refine the proposed bylaw if necessary. We are going to be preparing a second addendum that will outline especially that second tranche of changes that we went through to be released on the municipality's website. And then at present, we're anticipating that bylaw passage would occur on June 15th with implementation in January 2027, depending again on council's direction. Following that, the standard notification and legislative timelines would be observed. So this includes providing notice of bylaw passage within 20 days of the bylaw passage, and then last day for appeal being 40 days after passage, and then issuing a pamphlet notifying the public of the policies of the bylaw. And that would be within 60 days of it coming into force if it's not appealed. So that concludes the presentation that we prepared. Thank you so much for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tina. Councillor Deeb, you had a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just going back to the implementation options, there's a question or a statement, the estimated amount of DC revenue forgone is 545,000. And I'm just wondering, is that based on the projected development that would occur over those 2 years, or how is that calculated?
Tina, would you be able to take that? Tina, I think you're
Yes.
on mute.
My apologies. So
No problem.
yes, that is based on the anticipated development over the period. So if development is slower, then that number would actually decrease. However, if you experience an acceleration in the developments that you actually get, that could lead to a higher number. So for example, if you end up with a run on building permits, in order to take advantage of the slightly lower rate, then that number could actually increase.
Follow up, Councillor Need?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Any other, Councillor O, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The comparison chart that you have, Tina, that compares some of our neighboring municipalities for a single detached. Just a couple questions. It was brought up in some of the correspondence about Central Huron not being included in here. And there was a development that had been I guess that maybe went to Central Huron that didn't necessarily come here for maybe because of charges. Just wondering if we could include that in the addendum. And then last meeting, I had asked for a date implemented for each one of those municipalities because there's a big difference if they're coming up in a year's time for their study or whether they've just done one in the last year or two, just so that we're comparing apples to apples, because I don't know if, you know, Luke and Bedell for Blue Water, when they did their DC study. So just to know if they're on the process of changing theirs or whether they've already done that. So I'm just wondering if we could include that in the addendum moving forward as well.
Yeah, so
Tina?
through the chair, we're happy to include that information.
Great, thank you. Any other questions at this time? Councillor McLeod-Haggett.
Through you, Mayor Finch. I'm not sure who would be able to answer this one question, but for the projected growth, how do the growth that we had in 2025, how does it align with what the projected growth was? Are we close to what, or is there a big gap between?
Who would like to take that? Mr. Rolfe, I see you going for your mic. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, through the mayor. That is something that I'll have to get back to you on, Councillor McLeod-Haggett. I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head.
Councillor McLeod-Haggett.
So while you're doing that, Mike, could you do 2024 as well? Thank you.
Very well. Any other questions? Councillor Need, you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
What tools does the municipality have to get that money? Because that money is supposed to be going towards key infrastructure so that we don't actually put it on the tax levy. Because that's $500,000 that we could be projecting to put onto a tax levy or user fees. And I'm just wondering, like, what other tools does the municipality have in order to make up for that loss?
Tina, would you like to take that, or a member of staff?
I can start and maybe staff can take over. So generally, like unless there's grant funding that can be applied, it ends up falling to rate or, you know, and really because it is an economic development issue, it would fall to the taxes. I would say unless you're able to secure some grants that come out, it would end up falling to the taxes in some way.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Vaughn, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I'm thinking back to what you just presented about the addendum that's coming forward to us as the number 2 addendum. In the number 1 addendum, there was a table number 1, which spoke to wastewater services. It was page 5 in the actual addendum. I don't know if you have that document in front of you, but if you want to follow along with what I'm saying here. It did mention project number 18 and project number 20, which were the Huron Park projects that you actually talked about. One being no need for us to go through the emergency storage, and that's why we moved up the entire Huron Park upgrade 5 years earlier. But it's still showing on this table that was included in Addendum 1 as the same figures that were shown in the DC charges December 25. And so I'm just wondering, when you said you were going to provide something for Addendum 2, were you going to update this chart? Because this chart does not agree with what your presentation says.
Tina?
Yep. So through the mayor, that is one of the changes that we need to include and embrace in that second addendum as it's now revised this table. So in the second addendum, there'll be another table just like this one, but the cost for those projects, you'll see the emergency storage will now show as 0 to show it's completely coming off. And then for the Huron Park sewage pumping station projects, you would see a revised cost as well as the financing costs.
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan.
Yes, I do have another one. So this, just for clarity here from my thinking, is this study covering a 10 years worth of projects or 15 years of projects? I had thought it was 10.
No, so through the mayor, it's actually longer than that because there are projects that are going to 2039 in terms of the anticipated completion, and it is including projects to cover the build out horizon, which is longer than 10 years.
And does it need to be longer than 10 years? I'm just thinking in the past, we've had 10 years of DC charges projects, and this one is dealing with a 15-year window. So does it need to be 15 years, or is there flexibility from the municipality's perspective?
Tina?
So through the mayor, the municipality can go with the shorter horizon. However, what will happen is if you make the adjustments to the projects, you would also be adjusting the growth that's anticipated over the period. So right now we've taken growth over a longer horizon and then included projects over a longer horizon so that those costs are spread because the costs follow the growth. So if you have more growth and the projects to service that growth, then the cost will be divided by the growth. So even if you adjust the time frame to say a 10-year period, then would have to back out some of the growth to then recalculate the charges for the projects for that shorter horizon.
So that is actually doable. If we looked at only 10 years worth of growth, we could look at only 10 years worth of projects and come up with a development charges on that kind of a basis. Is that what you just said?
Yes, so through the mayor, yes, that's what I've said. I'd also add, though, that the other, if we think, for example, of water, wastewater infrastructure, a lot of these projects are large projects. So even if you end up saying we're only looking at 10 years, if you have to go forward with it, you'll probably build the whole thing and then wait to recover until you bring the growth later. So you won't necessarily be able to do a fraction of the project, but you do the whole project still. Because if it's required for the 10-year, but it's going to be built to a certain size, you'll still end up incurring the cost, interim financing to then recover the DCs when the growth happens.
Councillor Rowe?
Yeah, thank you. And just to further what Councillor Vaughan was saying, one example is on that table 1 that Councillor Vaughan mentioned before. There's a item number 14 for a mechanical sewage treatment plant for Exeter in 2039 for $20 million in this DC study. Now that's, we go 10 years for our capital budgeting outlook sort of thing, and we haven't even had those kind of discussions. And I guess the question is, should we be putting a $20 million item in here that we haven't even had a discussion on, and building development charges on something that council hasn't even had a discussion on it, or it hasn't been brought up at all. So, that's the 2039 window, which is, a long ways more than our 10-year outlook. I guess I'm just wondering why that number is in there at this point in time.
Tina, would you be able to respond?
And could it be removed?
Go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, so through the mayor, I would say if council has a desire to look at the timing of the projects, because there is a timing of completing a project, and then there's the other component, which is the driver, the reason the project's being undertaken, which is driven by what growth will be serviced by the project. So it'll be something that would have to go back and work with staff to understand if it can just come off, or if it's actually servicing growth that's happening within a period. Because the other, so all these projects right now are being, required to service the growth that's going to take place, that's been included in the development charges calculation. So if there's need to go back and really revisit the projects, then there'll probably be some realignment of timing. But the second aspect being who's actually benefiting from that infrastructure. So it may not end up being simply just taking out the project, because the anticipated timing is 2039.
Thank you. Councillor Need, go ahead.
I guess my concern with pulling those projects out would be we're just kicking the can further down the road and increasing the costs in 5 years when we do another study. And I think it's important. I do remember us having discussions as council about the trajectory of our sewage lagoons and the need for a mechanical plant. So I think we should be including all the things that we are anticipating we'll need so that we can financially plan appropriately. I don't think we want to come back in 5 years and have any drastic changes in our DC charges or our user fees. I think, the goal behind doing these DC charges along with doing our user fee studies is making sure that we have a fair and equitable and consistent approach to our costs moving forward for our residents. So I'm kind of wary about picking and choosing which projects that council wants to pull out of the projected DC charges for projects.
Councillor Oak.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I agree, Councillor Neep, with we don't want to kick the can down, but 5 years from now, there could be a number of other things out there. A 300% increase in development charges right now is more than I'm willing to want to stomach right at the moment. So we've got to find a happy balance of trying to either phase this in or take some projects out and defer them down the road. I guess going from 6,000 to 18,000 or 19,000 isn't where I'm landing right at the moment.
Councillor Vaughan.
Yes, I would like to say that I agree that some of these projects on the wastewater side, on the water side, the whole water tower project, which is 10 to 15 years out, water tower project, which is 10 to 15 years out, and deals with on the east side of Exeter primarily and growth over there. We haven't even really talked about that growth in a big, meaningful way. We have right now a number of developments that have been approved. And there's not much movement going on the actual housing development right now. So the growth that we anticipated back when we did the official plan, when Huron County did their growth plan, even when the initial work was done on the wastewater master study, Councillor Haggett has asked the question, quite rightly so, what kind of growth have we actually had? And so to me, to project some of these huge projects that are 10 to 15 years out and change those development fee numbers today for some growth that may or may not occur 10 to 15 years out, I don't think it's realistic. We haven't had a history of wild growth. I haven't actually seen crazy growth coming in here in terms of new builds of homes. We have many homes authorized right now to proceed, and they're not. The market's just not there. The building is just not happening. In a recent priority setting meeting that we had, we were given a number of pieces of information from different members of staff that also were telling us just how our demographic is actually shaping up in terms of we have many more seniors. We don't really have a lot of growth in salaries. The wages are not that high. So affordability and priority, I think it's important to get it right. And I think 15 years out is too long a horizon when there's actually nothing stopping us from looking at this in 5 years' time. I honestly don't think these projects, well, first of all, they haven't really been talked about around the council table, but I don't really think they're going to be real in 10 to 15 years. So I don't think we're going to lose the 500,000. Excellent question from Councillor Neeb per year. I just don't see it actually happening. So I have another question as well, which is not quite related to that. I'm trying to understand where the London Road South project is on this particular table. Can anybody actually answer that?
Down the London Road South Trunk Sewer.
Yeah, that one.
Tina, would you be able to respond?
Through the mayor, I will connect with Dawn and we can circle back on a response.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vaughn, you had something else?
Just to say I would really appreciate that because that one was also another project where large numbers of growth were mentioned. So yeah, I'd love to see that.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just also in line with that. The connecting link projects that we have right at the moment and the grants that we've got for those, are they included in here or is that as under a DC study or is it because we're just replacing what we have all there or is there a growth component to the connecting link two grant or two projects that we're doing right at the moment?
Tina?
So through the mayor, the only grants that we've reviewed that have applied to growth-related infrastructure was the one we spoke about. The connecting link, I believe, from conversations with staff, we're going towards asset management, so replacing existing infrastructure versus new infrastructure for growth.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod Haggett, please.
So this is more of a comment, but we have to balance out what we're looking at and doing here. We've had conversations where I have brought up the amount of foreclosures and power of sales that are happening within our municipality, within our county. I've talked to multiple law firms, real estate departments to see what's happening, and the numbers are growing. Like in Exeter alone, at Raymond, like at another Raymond McLean's, they've had 10 since January foreclosure power of sale files. We've had a couple at our firm. So if people are losing their homes, they're not going to be going out and buying new homes. So if these development charges are higher, no one is going to go and buy a new home or come here if they're losing their home in another community, especially if the cost of purchasing the new home that is a new build with any incentive is going to cost them more money. So we really have to balance and look at maybe we need to pull back on some projects. We need to reshift, move them around, and not be as aggressive as some of the projects have been. Since I've sat here, I have always said we do not have to keep putting so many pipes in the ground when the development is stalled.
Thank you, Councillor Neat.
Thank you through the chair. $19,000 on the cost for the development charge on the cost of a $500,000 home is 3.8%. And that 3.8% of the cost is designed to cover the infrastructure costs so that current taxpayers do not have to pay for that cost. I think it's also important to note that we have 7 active subdivisions on the go over the last 8 years. We've seen tremendous growth. Stony Ridge, Buckingham Estates, South Point, Crediton Village Center, Huron Park, Solhaven, and Windermere. We're not here to plan for a year from now. We're here to plan for the next decade, for the next 30 years. The investments that we make or we don't make will either lead to growth or stagnation. Not investing in infrastructure results in stagnation. And as a council, I think we need to come to some consensus here about whether we want the municipality to grow. 20 years ago, we had significant development in our water infrastructure and our waste infrastructure. Now we have 7 active subdivisions throughout the municipality. We don't improve an issue like housing affordability by not increasing housing. It's a market issue. 3.8% on the cost of a home does not necessarily make it more or less affordable, but it will make it less affordable for our property owners who have to pay that extra tax or the user fees. So I'm kind of confused as to the flip-flopping around the council table when we've made decisions over the last 4 years in order to promote growth, in order to attract development. Again, pulling projects out will only result in stagnation. It is not economic development.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod-Haggett.
So through you, Mayor Finch, this is a question for you, Councillor Neave. Have you driven through any of these subdivisions to see what development is actually happening within those subdivisions or how many units are for sale?
It's up to you if you wish to answer that. I'm not sure. But
I don't think it's relevant. I honestly don't think it's relevant at this point, considering we don't control the market and the market will come around. There still is a demand for housing. So what is currently happening might be good to have a discussion now, but it's not a place for planning for the future. We need to have some vision around the council table about what things could look like if we made the right investments.
thank you, Councillor Oak.
Yeah, and I agree. We plan for the future here, but we also have to be competitive with our neighbors. And so that's why I want to know what kind of playing field we're on with the chart that when things were implemented, because when developers decide to look at a municipality to put in a subdivision or whatever, they look at all facets, both the services you provide and but the cost as well, because they're in the business to make money as well. So we have to be competitive. So I want to make sure that I guess we're giving it our best shot right off the hop here. And some of these larger projects that are 10 to 15 years out, same question I had when we were looking at the wastewater and water studies. Are some of those projects, if we deferred them for a year and didn't put them in the 10-year, but they're in year 11 or 12, is it a make or break? Because if something had to be replaced, we've always moved things ahead if something had to happen. But I think the biggest thing is yes, we've had some good momentum with subdivisions in the last few years. Builds are slow right at the moment, and we've got the infrastructure there. But moving forward, we need to be competitive with our neighbors.
Thank you. Any other comments? Deputy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know how we can move forward without these charges. We have a lot of money tied up with pipes in the ground. We're going to have to go after them pipes, which we're doing now. And it's not just the pipes. We have fire, we have wreck, we have roads. I don't know how we cannot move ahead with this. I don't want to burden. We talk about people and having foreclosure. That comes back a big, huge thing to our taxes too. And that's where this is going to end up if we don't move forward with these charges. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Vaughn.
Sure. Thank you. And I don't necessarily agree that it's going to come landing back on our constituents. I know this is a big balancing act, whether it's going to be user fees, property taxes, or it's going to be developers that are actually paying development charges. There are bigger brains than the brains around this table that have been arguing this on white papers for years about the validity of development charges. But I am looking at a $6,000 development charge and moving up to $19,000 development charge, and I'm thinking that's just not realistic. I don't think our growth, we should be looking at a full 15 years out. I honestly think we could ask the staff to take a look at some of these projects that are hovering on the 15-year out cusp and determine if we really think that the growth that has been happening over the last 2 years is actually going to come anywhere near close to those projects being real in 15 years. I don't think this is a flip-flop. I heard that comment, and we change our minds around this council table all the time about what is the priority of the year. We change the priorities because grants become available. And because we want to make things cheaper for our constituents, we shift projects. We have a couple of road projects today that have been deferred at least 3 different years, and maybe even a 4th. So I don't see why we can't take a good hard look at what's coming up 15 years down the road. And do we really need to do this? Is our growth really looking? That's not a flip-flop. That's called taking a step back and reflecting upon the reality of the market conditions today. And do we really want to do that to our developers that we have already brought on and said, these are our development charges. They've made plans. They've put out risk for development. And I think to ignore that completely and ignore other market factors, it's only the wastewater and the water that are really driving these big charges. And so I'm just thinking, isn't it prudent for us to take a step, take a beat, and take a look at what are we actually saying we're going to do in the next 15 years before we put in these new charges. I also think it's important to get the information, as Councillor Oak suggested, when we're looking at these comparatives and how competitive we are to our neighbors, what are we actually looking at? Are we looking at old information or relatively current information? Because I think being competitive is also important.
Councillor Neat.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Finch. And just going back to the change and the adjustment, I think we should also reflect on 5 years ago, the market was considerably different than what it is today. And our current DC charges are not even remotely close to what the inflationary costs over the last 5 years have been. So when we're talking about this increase in cost as if it's arbitrary and made up, these are prescribed calculations given by the province of Ontario in order to calculate the DC charges. It reflects the true cost of the infrastructure, and it also reflects, I think, in my mind, what the future of South Huron could be if we make those small investments. Again, projects do move. I acknowledge that projects have moved, but if we don't have the money, again, it's not fair for our residents to have to increase the costs and have inconsistency in rates because we didn't plan properly, because we didn't plan for the growth. The province believes that South Huron will grow, which is a reason why we received multi-million-dollar grants in order to fund major infrastructure along our Main Street and London Road South. That's important. And if we turn away or get skittish at the fact that we might have to adjust the DC charges, which is a true reflection of these costs, then again, we're leading the municipality to stagnation. We are putting pipes in the ground that will not result in housing because we didn't make the appropriate investments when they were needed. And we didn't plan. We set aside a certain amount of money for our asset management plan to replace key infrastructure. Again, so that we don't have major cost fluctuations in our rates or our taxes. This is no different. It's just that we're planning for growth.
Thank you, Mr. Neeb. Any other questions or comments at this time? Okay, not seeing Councillor Oak.
Just a quick question to Tina. So just give me an example. Like if we were to take that $20 million project out of that table, what would that do to the DC charge for single family? I know the last time you had a calculator that when we had some scenarios, the last time you were at our meeting, you could give us a rough idea what that would do.
Tina, would you be able to respond?
Yep, so through the mayor, because the Development Charges Act is so prescriptive, I think would want to take that away and actually work through the project to make sure we're recognizing all the required deductions before we give you a number in terms of that reduction, which is a bit different from when we did the rates, because the rates, the legislation's a bit different. I did want to just kind of circle back a bit to talk about the projects that are included and just anchor to where these costs are coming from. So through the master plan, there was discussion around growth and what is required for growth, and it is looking at that longer term horizon. And that is part of what's being embraced in this DC study. And the one thing is that when you have all that growth and you have the cost, then you divide and you essentially get an average cost that is what would be paid per unit. And so now what happens is if you're going in and removing some of the costs so they're not being paid, you're changing a denominator. Excuse me, you're changing the denominator, it's changing some of the numerator, but when those projects now come in, you may have a smaller base to recover. And if they are required, then those costs would still be required from the same group or through rates or property taxes. And so what we've anchored to is that council approved master plan and then the growth that it's built to service. So just wanted to add that. And we will circle back regarding what that would look like if that project comes out and if it can come out, because what may be the case is that some of it is sized to benefit growth that's happening a little bit earlier. So you'd have to pull in some of the costs and then defer some of the costs. So it's a bit of a more technical process that we'll have to get back to you on.
Councillor Oak.
Thank you. Yeah, I just was curious in a dollar amount how it swings a 15 or 20 million dollar reduction and what the numbers do. Like we've been told we have all kinds of sewage capacity and water capacity, and even with our growth projections. So just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Not seeing any. Okay, Councillor Vaughn, go ahead, please.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts around next steps in terms of next steps, even for this meeting. I did hear Watson and Associates indicating that we might have opportunity to hear from the public, and I know that's not on the agenda, so I don't know that that's appropriate at all. But I'm also thinking in terms of next steps outside of this meeting. If there are certain things that we want as a council, like comparative information, more comparative information, or more information about certain projects, do we have to do a direction? Do we have to do a motion? What is required?
Ms. Basula Colson.
Through the mayor, motion would probably be the best bet. That way we have a formal tracking of what is requested. I know Tina's been taking notes and so has Alex. There's a few number of, perhaps we can coordinate the stuff that we have already from council into one resolution kind of to cover everything. As far as the public meeting's already happened. However, the public can provide comments through correspondence, which has been being brought forward. We do have meetings upcoming that correspondence will be attached to. So those are comments as well prior to any kind of a bylaw, or there's also the option to delegations to council as well.
Okay, thank you. Would you be entertaining a motion then, Councillor Vaughn, at some point?
Yes, I would at some point. Yes.
Okay.
I just not sure when that point, when we're going to get there.
Would you like to do it this meeting or you're looking at another meeting? Perhaps you could talk to our CEO about that and perhaps bring it back at the next meeting with Ms. Basula Colson.
Through the mayor, I think there were items that that Watson can bring back to council, whether or not it's correspondence or to an upcoming meeting. Some of that was brought up. I think if we can at least capture that at this meeting, if everybody's in agreement, and then we can go from there.
Councillor.
Thank you. Just one question. In here, it talked about this sewage pumping station at Dark Horse. Now with the change in ownership, how does that affect this this study as well? I guess whether the new owners are still in those kind of discussions as well.
Ms. Basula Colson.
Through the mayor, some of that is probably just still in discussion.
Yeah.
Right? I can't very well comment on that right now.
But we have it in our study.
We
right
do have it in our study.
and
That the
that
potential is
goes,
there, and that is what makes the most sense for the municipality
Yeah.
in that area, is at some point to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Whether or not the party is willing at this point, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions at all at this time? Councillor Vaughn.
Yes, one other process question, I think. We all know it's an election year. We're coming up to August 24th, where we'll know who's on the slate and potential for lame duck. So I know in some of the presentations we've been looking at, it's been said we have till December 31st of this year to actually finish the DC charges, pass a bylaw type of thing. But if we move into a lame duck scenario, are there certain months between now and then that we won't be able to make a decision on this at all?
Ms. Basula Colson.
For the mayor, I will have the clerk bring that information back, and if so, what would need to happen then is because the DCs will expire, then the council would have to go back into for another study. But yes, we can certainly respond to that one. Okay.
Okay. Yes, I think that would be important to understand the implications of delay.
Very good. Any further discussion, comments, questions for Tina? Councillor Vaughn.
Yes, thank you. One more, and that is we did get a couple of options in the PowerPoint presentation in terms of instituting these charges in January of next year, or only doing 50% and then another 50% in the next year type of thing. And this isn't really necessarily a question for Watson, but I'm just wondering, are those the only options that we have? We've received some correspondence from Builder Association that's basically has much lower type of phase-in approach. And so again, jumping from 6,000 to 19,000, there's a lot of moving pieces here. Is it possible to have a more of a stepped up approach to development charges, just even to have the options flushed out?
Ms. Basula Colson.
Through the mayor, yes, council has that capacity to do that. Now, I don't know whether or not, are you looking for something back to see kind of what it would look like? If so, if you do have a suggestion, maybe we can have that brought back. If you do have a phased in that you're considering, council considering, to see what it would look like.
Okay, if I may try to answer that at this point. A couple of things that are missing pieces of information that I think are important. And one is and you've probably got notes on this, Rebecca, already, but one was to basically have the comparative chart in terms of what the other municipalities have done in the past and are possibly about to do in the future. I also think it's important that we ask the staff to take a look at some of these projects that are in that 10 to 15 year cusp for realism in terms of knowing what we know about growth. Can these go out an extra couple of years without major implications to our constituents? Councillor Oak brings up a good point in terms of the mechanical treatment facility for $20 million. We don't have the information about how that might affect a going forward position. I think it's important to not only look at that sewage, but to look at potentially that entire water tower for the east end of Exeter.
Basula Colson, comment?
Through the mayor, having staff decide, at this point, we've been using the growth from Huron County, or we have had a basis. Staff cannot decide. We don't know what growth is going to look like. So to provide council with a definitive proposal on what we think growth will be like, that is not the information we have right now. Like 5 years ago, growth was different. In 5 years from now, it could be different again. What we can do, though, is if you want to have a scenario with those two projects removed, what will it look like? We can do that piece. But as far as recommendations on potential growth, we don't have the ability to do that. We can provide what would happen in the past. Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Vaughn, then Councillor Neeb.
Okay. I do understand that that's difficult for staff to have a crystal ball any more than any of the rest of us. We can only know what happened in the history. But I do like the idea that if we could look at some of those really big ones that are the drivers, and there are driving projects on the water side, and there are driving projects on the wastewater side. And if we could even have this scenario, if we were to defer them out past that 15-year time frame, what would that look like from a development charges perspective? That's what I'm asking for. I'm not landing on any solution. I want to make that clear. I'm just saying it would be nice to have all of this information for when we make that decision. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Neeb.
Just a question about those two projects. Were those included in the water and the wastewater master plan?
Yes, they were.
Which has been adopted by council?
That is correct.
I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Neeb. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. So we don't know what growth is going to look like, but no one has that crystal ball as was described, but we do know growth is going to happen, and we must do what we have to do to make sure we facilitate that to be the strong economic engine we've become over the last number of years. Any other comments at this time? Not seeing any. Ms. Basula Colson, thank you very much to our guests tonight for attending and for your information you provided. And we'll go to our recommendation, please.
Through the mayor, I believe Councillor Vaughn was looking to propose a recommendation. Perhaps the clerk could maybe draft something.
We're just going to do the recommendation, then go back to your.
Okay.
Thank you.
That South Huron Council receives a development charges study presentation by Tina Cindy and Sean Michael Stephen of Watson and Associates.
And I move it for that, please. Moved by Councillor Oak, seconded by Councillor Neeb. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor. And that carries with 7, and we'll just wait for our clerk to prepare the other motion. We're just going to take a 5-minute recess, everyone. 5 minutes, not 10, and allows our clerk to get this prepared properly. And thank you, everyone. That was a Huron County 5-minute intermission there. So welcome everyone back. Madam Clerk, you have a motion, I believe.
That the following information regarding the development charges study be brought back to council. Actual growth from 2024 and 2025, comparative municipal DC implementation dates and expiry, including Central Huron, London Road trunk sewer incorporation into the study, if any, potential impact on moving out the mechanical wastewater plant and North Exeter elevated tank, which is the water tower, both separately and together, and how those costs were calculated. What projects are DC eligible that are incorporated into the North Exeter elevated tank project, if any, and lame duck implications, if any.
Councillor Vaughn, so moved.
So moved.
Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor McLeod Haggett seconds. Is there any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That carries with 7. Thank you. Ms. Masul Carlson, where are we going here now?
To the mayor, is there any other resolution at this point? If not, then there's no closed session. So there's no report from closed. So then the next is adjournment.
Deputy Mayor moves, seconded by Councillor Neve. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that carries with 7. Thank you, everyone. And it is 5:17 p.m.